Okay, so to start our new project, we're going to go into Xcode, click on it, and as you can see, I'm using the latest version, which is 6.0.1, and I'm going down to create a new Xcode project. It's going to be a single view application, and I'm going to click Next. Let's name it, let's call it Guess the Item. That sounds good enough. Organization name, you could just put in your own name if you don't have one. Organization identifier, this is going to be something you're going to need when you start uploading to the Apple Store because they need to have a unique way of actually tagging to know that it's your work. It's going to be, the language of course is Swift, device is set to iPhone, and we are not going to use core data. So click Next, and you can save it wherever you want to. And okay, so now we've got our opening page for Xcode for our new project. You don't have to worry so much about all this right now. I know it can look a little intimidating, but we're going to get into that as we get further along in our tutorials. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our user interface. So we're going to go over here and click Main Storyboard. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to highlight this. See how I did that and made it blue? Let me click that off again. Just kind of dragged over that. I'm going to go over to this button. It's the third from the right. It's Attributes Inspector button. Usually a tooltip will come up, but for some reason it's not. And I'm going down to the first drop down, and I'm going to change this size to an iPhone 5.5. And when I do that, you see it gets to be a little bit more of a familiar shape. And I'm just going to move this over here so we can get nice and close. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to need a few labels. So down here, you can get all of your interface builder items down on this bottom right-hand corner. And here we scroll down to label. So I'm going to put 1 and 2. I'm doing a total of 4 up on the top, because these are going to be sort of our items that we're going to be in our array. So they're actually items in our array, as you'll see when we get to the code section. We also need a text field, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit more, and that's going to go right here. You see how Xcode lines that up real nicely with the blue lines, guidelines. Okay, I'm going to just to about there and over to about here, and this is what the user or the player is going to type in his guess. And we also need a button. Now this is also down here. A little quick trick: if you go down, click into this text field, start typing in what you need, it'll come right up. So there it is, button. And this is to add our guess. Now we also need a label, so I'll go back down here and start typing in label. Here it is. We're going to do a label up in here. And this is going to have our message, whether we got the guess correctly or if we got it wrong. And lastly, we are going to grab another label, and I'm going to put it down here, and that's really going to be our label for our score. So this isn't looking exactly like our game that I had showed you, but so we're going to start changing it up a little bit. I'm going to double click on the label. See, all I have to do is double click. And I'm going to type in the first item. I'm going to do car. And I'm going to go over to the second label and do the same thing. Double click in there and make sure it's highlighted. And I'm going to type in boat. And the third thing. Now I've clicked on it, but I'm going to show you another way to change the property. So I clicked on it, and it is the label. So you go down here to the second line here, and that's really the value. So I'm going to put in, let's see, tree. And finally, let's do, again, I just clicked on that. See how I did that? I could have double clicked or clicked. I'm just showing you two different ways. And we've got house. And we need this to be a little bit bigger. There we go. And continuing down, let's change our button text. Again, I'm going to double click on it. And I'm going to call it check guess. So basically the user is going to type in a guess here, and he's going to click this button to register his guess. Now this label, I'm going to just keep it like that for a minute, and I'll get back to that, but I'm going to go down here, and this is going to be our score label. And if you notice in the original game, we had score, number of guesses, and games played. We're going to get to that in later videos in this series, but I want to just start with the score. So we're just going to leave the score thing, score label there for now by itself and not add the other two. And I need one more label. And I'll show you another way you can do this. Okay, so I highlighted this label. I'm going to hold down my Alt button, and while I'm holding it down, see I have that green plus? I'm going to click it right up to it. Looks about good. To there. And now I unclicked it, and I'm just releasing the Alt button. So remember, hold down the Alt button while you're clicking and dragging. And let's change this to guess. Okay. So far, so good. I think we have everything we need. This, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and as I mentioned, this is going to show us our error messages if the user doesn't guess it correctly. And I'm going to go back over to here. Again, I'm in the Attributes Inspector. We're going to go down to the alignment, and I'm going to make it just center aligned. And I don't want this black color, so I'm going to go and change the color to a red. So now, any text that's in there is going to show up in red. It's not looking very aligned, however, but there we go. That's probably a little bit better. Okay, now we are all set at this point with adding things to our storyboard. Now we need to connect these items to our ViewController.Swift coding page. And to do that, file. To do that, we're going to go back over to main.storyboard. I'm going to close out this left pane. So if you go over here, the top right hand, close that out just by clicking on that button. And I'm going to go over to this button right in here, and it looks like a little tuxedo or a suit. That's the Assistant Editor. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to just move my storyboard over a little bit. There we go. See, I highlighted it, turned it blue, and dragged it. Okay. Now it's time to start connecting these things to our code. The first thing I want to do is click on the text field, and I'm going to control and drag. So I'm hitting control, clicking and dragging. You see that blue line that comes up? And I'm going to make a connection. And I'm going to release it just below the class view controller line right here. And the type of connection is an outlet, and I'm going to name it guess field, and it's of type UI text field, and the storage is weak. We'll hit connect, and see it creates this variable for us here. There's IB outlet, and I'm going to give ourselves a little bit more room. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to connect our label. So I'm again control, click and drag. I'm going to release it. It's also going to be an outlet. This one I'm going to call message label, and it's of type UI label, and again the storage is weak, and we're just going to hit connect, and there we go. We have our second one, our second IB outlet. Now the last thing we're going to do for this section is connecting our button. So again, control, click and drag. This time it's going to be an action. We want something to happen when the button is clicked. So we switch that from outlet to action, and I'm going to name this result button, and it is of type UI button, and the event is touch up inside. That's when the user touches a button on the phone and then releases it. So it's called touch up inside. And there's a lot of different varieties, but the default is touch up inside, and we're going to keep it that way. The argument is sender. We're going to leave that as the default and hit connect. Alrighty. Now we've got our items that need to be connected to Swift, our main ViewController.Swift. Got them connected. These we don't need to connect them. They're just displaying things. And same with this label. They're not doing anything. They're just, they're basically just user interface stuff. So they don't need to do anything. Whereas we need to get a value from the guess field. We need to change the text property of this label. And we need this button to do something when there is an action, when it's being touched. And the score we also need to get done. So actually, we can do that right now. I'm going to control, click, and drag. And I like to put on my outlets up in one section, my IB actions in another. So this is an outlet, and this is going to be called score label. And it's again of type UI label, and we're going to hit connect. All right, there we go. Sorry, I almost forgot about that little score button. Now, before we finish up this first video in this series, we need to add one more thing to our user interface, and that is a navigation bar. So in the lower right-hand corner, I'm going to start typing in navigation, and here we go. Here's navigation bar. I'm going to put that up at the top, and Xcode's really good about getting us these blue alignment lines, which are great. So there we go. It's up at the top. Oh, let me just shift that over a little bit. There we go. I'm going to change the title to say, "What am I?" Question mark. And we also are going to need a button over here. And this button is going to be our new game button. And I'll explain that into the next video and exactly what that does. But that will be able to pick one of these things from an array at random. So I'm going to go down here and let's see, bar. I'm going to start typing in bar button item. And there we go. I'm going to drag that. I'm going to put it on the left-hand side. And I'm going to double click to change the name. If you don't want to do that, you can also just click on it and you can change the name over here where it says title. Either one will work. So I'm double clicking on it and I say new game. There. Okay. Now, like we did with the others, we need to connect this to our viewcontroller.swift file. So I will close out the right-hand pane. I'm going to open up the assistant editor again. I'm going to make some room here so we can see what we're doing here. Oops, I seem to be... Here we go. There we go. Now we can see it. I'm going to push this back up. All right. So make sure I click on that bar button item. I'm going to control and drag. And like I said, I like to keep my IB actions and my IB outlets sort of together but separate. So I'm going to put that one right. Oh, that didn't work. Hang on one second. Let me see. Click this again. And we're going to click and drag. There we go. Okay. Again, this is a button, so we're going to change it to an action. And I'm going to call this new game button. And it is of type UI bar button item. And hit connect. All right, I'm going to give ourselves some room. There we go. Okay, so this really is it for the first video. I'll see you in the next one, and we will get working on the actual code.